A fake HOA crew was about to tow my truck, chain already hooked, engine rumbling, when my brother stepped out of the garage, holding a wrench like he meant business. The scam was about to unravel fast, and not how they expected. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The morning had that kind of stillness you only get in suburbia. Crisp light casting long shadows across driveways, the occasional dog barking somewhere behind a cedar fence, the hum of a distant leaf blower just starting up. My coffee was still steaming on the kitchen counter, the mug warm in my hands when the sound hit. 3 sharp, deliberate bangs on the front door. Not the kind of knock you get from neighbors asking for sugar or kids selling fundraisers. It was urgent, aggressive, like a search warrant was about to be served. I opened the door and immediately got hit with a wave of something that didn't sit right. 2 guys stood on my porch like they were auditioning for low-budget traffic cop roles. Both wore those thin, neon-reflective vests you can buy in bulk for $10 online. One had a clipboard tucked under his arm like it gave him power. He was short, wiry, with the kind of smug expression that looked like it had been worn into his face over time. His sunglasses were too dark for 8 a.m. His words came out like a bark, short and sharp. "You're in violation of HOA Code 17C. Unauthorized commercial vehicle on residential property. Your truck's getting towed." I blinked. My brain stuttered. HOA code? What code? I felt the chill crawl up my spine, the kind that comes not from fear, but from confusion that suddenly feels dangerous. My voice was steady, though. "That's my personal pickup. I don't run a business out of it, and we're not even part of an HOA." The guy didn't flinch. He didn't even hear me, like he'd already decided I was guilty and the rest was just noise. Behind him, his partner, taller, bulkier, with a patchy beard and the kind of silent presence that implied threat more than authority, jerked his thumb toward the curb. There, a tow truck idled, driver behind the wheel, already looking halfway through the motions. The tall guy said, "Doesn't matter. We're authorized by the Neighborhood Standards Patrol." Neighborhood Standards Patrol. Sounded like something a middle school hall monitor made up. I squinted, scanning their uniforms. No badges, no names, nothing official. Just 2 guys playing pretend in my front yard. And the scariest part? They believed it. Clipboard guy waved the tow truck forward with the same confidence you'd expect from an actual marshal. They weren't asking. They were doing. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't confusion. This was a setup. I stepped out onto the driveway with a heat rising in my chest. Not just anger, but the creeping, nauseating sense that something grotesquely wrong was unfolding in plain sight. The morning sun had sharpened, casting long beams across the pavement, illuminating every false detail. The store-bought vests, the blank clipboards, the lack of any insignia or even the smallest trace of accountability. The illusion of authority fell apart under scrutiny, but they didn't flinch. That made it worse. I circled closer, eyes locked on their chests, scanning for a badge, a name, anything. But it was all surface. No IDs, no emblems, just generic arrogance sewn into dollar store mesh. The tow truck driver, middle-aged with sun-leathered skin and a trucker cap pulled low, was standing near his rig, shifting uncomfortably from boot to boot. He wasn't part of the scam, not really. That much was obvious. He kept looking from me to clipboard guy like a man trying to convince himself this wasn't going to end in a lawsuit. "We got the address from these guys," he mumbled, nodding toward the fake enforcers like he regretted every step that brought him here. That's when the truth clicked into place, cold and sharp. My stomach dropped, not out of fear, but from the sheer audacity of it. These guys weren't city employees, weren't county inspectors, weren't anybody. Just con men in reflective vests, slapping fake codes onto windshields and hoping no one fought back. I turned, my voice louder now, direct. "You're not with any authority. You're pretending. This is theft." Clipboard guy, the shorter one with the permanent sneer, later I'd learn his name was Chad, which fit too perfectly, scoffed like I was the problem. "We're volunteers," he snapped. "We're just keeping the place respectable. You should be thanking us." The way he said respectable made my skin crawl. It wasn't about order, it was about control, about lording power over anyone who wouldn't challenge them. They had the performance down, confidence, jargon, matching vests. That's all it took to trick people into compliance. And judging by the way they moved, the way the taller guy had already unspooled the tow chain and walked it toward my truck's rear axle, this wasn't their first rodeo. What cut deepest wasn't just the scam. It was the silence. 3 of my neighbors were out, watching from their porches like this was some afternoon drama. Not one stepped forward. Not a word, not a protest, not even a warning shout. They watched my rights being trampled like it was none of their business. That was the moment I understood. When no one stands up, scammers grow bold. And these 2 were bold as hell. The clank of the metal chain hooking onto my rear axle was the sound of a line being crossed. I felt it deep in my gut, like someone jabbing a hot poker straight through my patience. And just when I was about to lose it, a new voice cracked through the tension like a crowbar to glass. "You touch that truck again, and I swear to God I'm gonna torque your elbows backward." The tone was calm, but that kind of calm that sits on top of a volcano. I didn't even have to turn around. I knew exactly who it was. Caleb. He stepped out from the shadow of the garage like something summoned. Sweat streaked down his neck, staining the collar of a torn-up work shirt. In one hand, he held a wrench so big it looked forged from rebar and revenge. His shoulders filled the doorframe, 6'2" tattooed forearms, and a face carved into a permanent "don't screw with me" expression. Caleb didn't walk into situations. He confronted them. The transformation in the air was immediate. You could almost hear the gears shifting in the heads of the fake HOA duo. The tall one stiffened, and the shorter one, Chad, of course, blinked too fast, like he'd suddenly realized this wasn't going to be another easy mark. Still, he tried to muster that brittle fake confidence. His voice cracked as he blurted, "We're authorized!" Caleb didn't even blink. He took 3 deliberate steps forward, rotating the wrench in slow, silent circles like he was testing gravity itself. "Then call the cops," he said, steady and low. "Right now. Let's see how authorized you really are." And that was it. The entire scam unraveled right there in the driveway. The tow truck driver, who'd been half committed to the job, half terrified of being on the wrong side of a lawsuit, made his choice fast. He dropped the chain like it was radioactive and muttered, "I was just doing what I was told." His hands were already up like he wanted nothing more than to vanish. A second later, he was halfway back to the truck cab, the engine sputtering back to life as he prepared to get as far away from this mess as possible. Chad tried to backpedal, muttering something under his breath, but Caleb wasn't done. He pulled out his phone, snapped photos like a cop documenting a crime scene, license plate, their faces, the unmarked vests. No panic, just precision. "This is fraud," he said flatly, voice cutting through the air like cold steel. "You're impersonating officials. That's a felony." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating, and for the first time that morning the con men looked small, shrinking beneath the weight of someone who didn't just know the rules but knew how to fight back. The word felony hit harder than the wrench ever could have. You could see it land right between Chad's smug little eyebrows. His face twitched, jaw tightening, that brittle mask of bravado cracking at the edges like old paint. For the first time all morning, he looked unsure, exposed, like a magician whose sleeves just got yanked back mid-trick. He opened his mouth, and what came out was a pitiful scramble of half-formed excuses. We were just trying to help the community," he said. voice suddenly small and hollow, the cadence of a man who knows he's standing on a trap door and hears the hinges groaning. Then he ran. Not fast, not in a sprint, just a sharp pivot and a panicked shuffle toward their dusty white van, the one that still had Neighborhood Standards Patrol stenciled on the side in fading vinyl letters, crooked and bubbling at the corners. He yanked the driver's door open like he expected to make a clean getaway. But Caleb had already pulled out his phone long before Chad's legs started moving. The call to the sheriff had been placed the second the word fraud left his mouth. They were done. The deputies showed up faster than expected, 2 black and white cruisers pulling up with no sirens, just cold authority in motion. They stepped out in mirrored sunglasses and boots that crushed gravel with each step, radiating the kind of calm that said they'd seen every variation of stupid human behavior, and still weren't surprised by the new ones. What did surprise them, at least a little, was how far this scam had gone. Turns out Chad and his meathead sidekick had been making the rounds in neighborhoods all over the county. There was a case file already open. A couple in a nearby suburb had been scammed out of $300 in release fees after their family sedan got towed from their own driveway. Another report mentioned them harassing a retired veteran over an expired fence permit. It wasn't just a hustle. It was a routine. This morning, it ended. The handcuffs went on with satisfying clicks. Chad didn't say much as they were led to the squad car, but the glare he shot back at us was pure venom. Eyes narrowed, lips curled, like he thought we'd taken something from him. Caleb just watched him with the same calm he always wore under pressure. He spun the wrench once in his hand, let it drop back to his side like a six-shooter cooling down after a duel, and muttered, almost too low for anyone else to hear, "Maybe next time try getting a real job." It wasn't just a burn. It was a sentence. Full stop. Case closed. News spreads fast in a neighborhood that prides itself on silence. Within hours, the street had shifted, from that tight-lipped, blinds-drawn unease to a buzz of cautious admiration. The same neighbors who'd stood idle on their porches while Caleb and I squared off with 2 frauds in reflective vests were now knocking on our door, holding cups of coffee, baked goods, and awkward apologies wrapped in gratitude. It wasn't guilt exactly, but it was something close. A woman named Cheryl, who lived 3 houses down and kept her lawn trimmed to the inch, came by with a tray of lemon bars and a story she clearly hadn't told anyone until now. She said Chad and his partner had knocked on her door the week before, clipboard in hand, claiming her bushes were encroaching on the public sidewalk, some nonsense about a lawn visibility infraction. They'd offered to take care of it for a small fee. She hadn't paid, not yet, but she'd been thinking about it. The worry had kept her up for nights, she said. Another guy, Rick, the one with the base boat that hadn't seen water in a decade, stopped me while I was getting the mail. He scratched his head and mumbled, "They tried to tow it last month. Said I was violating visibility codes or some other garbage." He looked down, ashamed. "I let it go. Figured it was just my turn in the barrel." That phrase stuck with me. My turn in the barrel. Like harassment was just a rotation, a roulette spin of who'd get targeted next. And for a while, maybe it was. The sheriff's office put out a statement by the end of the day. It was printed in the local online bulletin, the kind of site usually reserved for lost cats and bake sale announcements. The headline was bold and to the point. Fake HOA enforcers arrested for towing scam. Reading it felt like an exhale, like the street finally unclenched. We weren't heroes. Caleb and I didn't do anything extraordinary. We didn't plan some brave stand. We just refused to roll over when someone tried to strip us of what was ours. But something about standing firm in broad daylight, about calling out a lie and backing it up with a wrench, seemed to resonate. The nickname started as a joke, probably from Rick. The Wrench of Justice. A ridiculous, half-serious title, like something out of a late-night action flick. But it stuck. It got passed around in whispers and chuckles, and pretty soon people were using it without irony. Caleb pretended to hate it, rolled his eyes, but I saw the way he stood a little straighter when someone said it. And I'll admit, seeing him lean against the garage door, wrench in hand, wearing that half-smirk, yeah, it fit. It's unsettling, really, how little it takes to convince people to hand over their power. A neon vest, a clipboard with a few printed forms, a voice that carries just enough condescension to mimic confidence. That's the uniform of control in neighborhoods like ours. Most folks don't look beyond it. They see the costume, hear the lingo, and fall in line. Not because they're weak, but because it's easier. Easier to assume authority is real than to question its source. Easier to comply than to confront. But that morning changed something. For me, for Caleb, and, judging by the wary nods and longer conversations now happening between driveways, for the entire block. We didn't take a stand out of pride. There was no speech, no grand gesture. It was instinct. Something primal. You see someone trying to take what's yours under the guise of regulation, and your gut tells you the truth before your brain catches up. That gut check is what saved my truck, what cracked the scam wide open, and what reminded me that sometimes all a bully needs is to be told no by someone who means it. Caleb didn't need a uniform or a badge. All he needed was the truth and a wrench that looked like it could double as a medieval weapon. That's the thing about real authority. It doesn't announce itself with laminated cards or fluorescent accessories. It doesn't strut or bark. It stands, solid, unshaken. The fake HOA cops? They got 6 months in county and a mugshot that'll follow every job application they fill out for the rest of their lives. Their names are no longer anonymous behind mirrored shades. They're indexed in the system they tried to impersonate. Irony doesn't always hit that clean, but when it does, it leaves a mark. As for my truck, still parked exactly where it's always been. No chalk lines, no violation slips, no chains around the axle. Just a little dust from the trees and the glare off the chrome when the sun catches it right. I raised the flag the next morning, not out of performative patriotism, but to say something without saying a word. This driveway's ours, not leased by fear, not governed by scam artists, and definitely not subject to fake codes dreamt up by clowns in reflective gear. Let them try it again, somewhere else.